He escaped for the 7th time on the winter solstice. The royal guards found Prince Aldrich's bed empty at dawn, again, the blankets arranged in a small lump that might have fooled someone who wasn't looking closely. The window cracked open just enough for a determined 3-year-old cub to squeeze through, again. 7 times, Captain Theron said, his voice tight with frustration. 7 times in 2 months. How does a cub that small keep evading 40 trained guards? Alpha King Cassius stood at the window of his son's empty chamber, staring out at the frost-covered grounds. His jaw was granite. His eyes were winter itself. "Find him," he said quietly. "Bring him back. And this time, I want to know where he's going." Because that was the thing that made no sense. The cub wasn't running away. Not really. He always came back, or was found, within hours. Cold, hungry, exhausted. But strangely peaceful. As if wherever he'd gone had given him something the palace couldn't. "Your Majesty," Captain Theron said carefully, "the trackers say they've followed his scent trail. Every time, it leads to the same place." "Where?" "The eastern ruins. The old watchtower beyond the forest." A pause. "Where the Omega was exiled 3 years ago." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Impossible," the king said. His voice was ice over steel. "She's dead." The council confirmed it. An Omega alone in winter, with no pack, no shelter, no resources. She couldn't have survived more than a few weeks. "That's what the council said, Your Majesty. But? The cub keeps going there, to that exact location. And every time we find him, he's curled up in the ruins, sleeping, like he's waiting for someone." The king's hands fisted at his sides. "Assemble a tracking party," he said quietly. "I'm going with you this time. If my son is being drawn to those ruins, I need to know why. Your Majesty, if the Omega is somehow still alive, then she's violating the terms of her exile by remaining within kingdom borders, and she'll be arrested." His voice was absolutely empty. "Either way, this ends today." Captain Theron bowed and left. The king stood alone in his son's empty chamber, surrounded by toys that had never been played with, and a bed that was always abandoned. And he tried very hard not to remember green eyes, copper hair, a smile that had made him believe, just for a moment, that being king didn't have to mean being alone. He tried not to remember the Omega he'd been forced to exile. The Omega who'd given birth to his son, and then vanished into winter. The Omega the council swore was dead. Chapter 1. The Ruins. I woke to the sound of small paws on frozen stone. Not an unusual sound. The ruins were full of mice and birds and the occasional fox looking for shelter from the cold. I'd learned to sleep through most of it. But this was different. This was purposeful, deliberate. The padding of paws that knew exactly where they were going. I sat up slowly in my nest of stolen furs and scavenged cloth. My breath misted in the pre-dawn air. The fire had died to embers hours ago. A small shape appeared in the doorway. Wolf cub, maybe 3 years old. Black fur with silver markings. Eyes that glowed amber in the dim light. Those eyes. I knew those eyes. "Aldrich," I breathed. The cub yipped happily and bounded toward me. Shifted mid-leap, a flash of light, a ripple of magic. And suddenly, a small boy with dark curls and those devastating amber eyes was throwing himself into my arms. "Mama!" His small hands fisted in my ragged cloak. "I came back! I found you again!" My heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. "Sweet boy," I whispered, pulling him close. "Sweet, brave, foolish boy. You can't keep doing this. The guards will find you. They'll... Don't care." He burrowed deeper against my chest. "You're cold, Mama. I'll keep you warm." He shifted back to cub form and curled against me, a small furnace of body heat and absolute determination. I wrapped my arms around him and tried not to weep. 7 times. 7 times in 2 months he'd escaped the palace and found me here. 7 times I'd held him for a few precious hours before the guards came and dragged him back. 7 times I'd watched them take my son away while I hid in the shadows, invisible, forgotten, dead, according to the council. And that's how I needed to stay. Because if Alpha King Cassius knew I'd survived, if he knew I was still alive, still within his territory, still breathing the same air as the son I'd been forced to abandon, the consequences would be worse than death. "Tell me a story, Mama," Aldrich mumbled against my chest, already half asleep, exhausted from his journey through the forest. "What kind of story?" "The one about the moon and the wolves. The old story. The one I'd told him every night during the 3 months I'd been allowed to nurse him before the exile. 3 months. That's all they'd given me. 3 months to bond with my son before the council declared me unfit, before they named me a threat to the crown, before they banished me to the wilderness to die. I'd survived out of spite, out of desperate hope, out of the faint, impossible dream that someday, somehow I'd see my son again. I never imagined he'd be the one to find me. Once upon a time, I began softly, the moon loved the wolves. I was halfway through the story when I heard it. Voices, distant but growing closer. Guards. Tracks led this way. How does he keep finding this place? The king wants answers. The king. My blood turned to ice. Cassius was here. Coming here. From to these ruins, where I was holding our son. Aldrich. I shook him gently. "Baby, you need to wake up. You need to go to them. They're coming for you." "Don't want to go." He clung tighter. "Want to stay with you." "I know, sweetheart. I know. But if they find us together," my voice broke, "please, go to them. Pretend you were alone. Tell them you were just exploring. Don't tell them about me." "But Mama, please," I kissed his forehead. "For me. Be brave one more time." He looked at me with eyes too old for his small face. Eyes that had seen too much. Understood too much. "Will you be here next time?" he whispered. "When I come back?" "Always." A promise I had no right to make. "I'll always be here." He shifted to cub form, licked my hand once, then trotted toward the doorway. I pressed myself into the shadows of the ruined watchtower and tried to become invisible. Tried to disappear the way I'd been disappearing for 3 years. But then Aldrich stopped, looked back at me, and howled. Not a cub's yip, a full-throated howl. Loud, clear, unmistakable, calling them directly to us. "No," I breathed. "No, baby, what are you?" But I already knew what he was doing. He was making a choice. His choice. Refusing to hide anymore. Refusing to pretend I didn't exist. The voices outside went silent. Then footsteps. Fast. Coming closer. I stood slowly, wrapped my ragged cloak tighter around myself. Lifted my chin. If this was how it ended, I would face it standing. The doorway darkened. A figure stepped through. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the lethal grace of an alpha in his prime. Amber eyes locked onto mine. Cassius, my mate, my king, the man who'd exiled me to die. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Sarah?" His voice was barely a whisper. You're alive?" "Apparently." My voice was steady despite my racing heart. "Surprise. Want to know why an alpha king exiled his own mate? Why the council declared her dead? Why a 3-year-old cub has been defying 40 guards to find her? Stay with me, because this secret is about to tear a kingdom apart." Chapter 2. The truth, Cassius took a step toward me. I took a step back. His eyes tracked the movement, noted the way I moved, carefully, protecting my left side where an old injury had never quite healed. Noted my weight loss, the scars on my hands, the hollow circles under my eyes, with 3 years of evidence written across my body. "You're alive," he said again, like he couldn't quite believe it. "Disappointed?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Disappointed? He looked at me like I'd struck him. "Sarah, we all thought..." He stopped. Started again. "The scouts reported back that you'd died, that they found evidence of..." His voice broke. "They said you were gone." "They lied." I moved to put myself between him and Aldrich. Or the council lied to them. One of the two. The council wouldn't. The council wanted me dead, Cassius. They made that very clear when they exiled a nursing mother in the middle of winter with nothing but the clothes on her back. My hands clenched. Did you really think I'd survive that? Or were you counting on nature to do what the execution block couldn't? His face went white. "I didn't want you exiled. I fought them. I argued for hours. But in the end, you signed the decree." I met his eyes. "You chose the crown over your mate. You chose the council's approval over our family." "I chose my son's safety," his voice cracked. "They said, Sarah, they said if I refused the exile, they'd declare Aldrich illegitimate. Strip him of his title. Remove him from succession. They said..." He stopped. Swallowed hard. "They said they'd kill him rather than see an Omega's bastard sit on the throne." The world tilted. "What?" "The council. Half of them anyway. The old guard. They didn't want an Omega Luna. Didn't want Omega blood in the royal line." His eyes were desperate. "So they gave me a choice. Exile you, or claim Aldrich as my sole heir conceived through a temporary arrangement and preserve his life. Or refuse and watch them declare our mating illegal and our son forfeit. So you chose him." My voice was hollow. "You saved our son by sacrificing me. I chose wrong." His hands were shaking. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd want me to protect Aldrich at any cost. You thought I'd be dead before it mattered." The truth sat between us like broken glass. "You thought I'd die in exile, and the problem would solve itself. No." He took another step forward. "I sent scouts, quietly, paid them to search for you, to bring you supplies, I never saw any scouts." My laugh was bitter. "I never saw anyone except the guards who came to drag Aldrich back each time he escaped to find me." Cassius's eyes went to his son, to the small cub watching this exchange with ancient, knowing eyes. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long has he been coming here?" 2 months, 7 times. I touched Aldrich's head gently. "He finds me every time. I don't know how. I didn't even know he knew I existed. I told him..." Cassius's voice was rough. "I told him about you. I thought, if you were dead, he deserved to know his mother. To know she'd loved him. To know she didn't abandon him by choice. But I'm not dead. No." His eyes held mine. "You're not." Captain Theron appeared in the doorway. "Your Majesty, we've secured the perimeter." He stopped, stared at me. "By the moon. That's the exiled Omega." "Yes." Cassius didn't look away from me. "And she's coming back to the palace with us. Your Majesty, the exile decree is hereby revoked, on my authority as Alpha King." His voice was iron. "She's under my protection now. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The council will object. The council can rot." He turned to his captain. "Send riders ahead. I want an emergency session called. Every council member in the throne room by noon. And I want the head of every scout who reported this Omega's death brought before me in chains. Your Majesty, they lied Theron. They told me she was dead when she was starving in ruins 5 miles from the palace. Either they lied deliberately, or they failed to do their jobs." His eyes were cold. "Either way, they answer for it." He turned back to me. "You're coming home," he said quietly. "You and Aldrich both. And I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix everything I broke." "You can't," my voice shook. "You can't just revoke an exile. You can't just overturn the council's decision. They'll what? Threaten my son again?" His eyes were blazing. "Let them try. Let them stand before me and explain why they wanted an innocent Omega dead. Why they threatened a child's life. Why they forced me to choose between my mate and my heir." He moved closer, close enough that I could feel his body heat. "I was a coward 3 years ago," he said quietly. "I let them intimidate me. Let them make me believe I had no choice. Let them take you from me because I was too afraid to fight back." His hand rose slowly, carefully, is giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers touched my cheek. Rough, gentle, shaking. "But I'm not afraid anymore," he whispered. "Because the worst thing they could do to me, they already did. They took you. They almost killed you. They stole 3 years of our lives." His thumb traced the hollow of my cheek. "So let them try to take you again. Let them try to threaten Aldrich. Let them try to stop me from claiming my mate and my family." He leaned closer. "I'll burn the whole kingdom down before I let them touch either of you." The mate bond, stretched thin for 3 years, barely a whisper, suddenly roared to life, like a dam breaking, like a wound finally closing, like coming home. I gasped, stumbled. Cassius caught me, pulled me against his chest, held me like he'd never let go. "I've got you," he breathed. "I've got you. You're safe now. You're both safe." Aldrich shifted to human form, wrapped his small arms around both of us. "Mama's coming home?" he asked hopefully. "For real this time?" "For real," Cassius said. His voice was thick. "Your mama's coming home." I buried my face against his chest and finally, let myself cry. For 3 years of survival, for 3 years of loneliness, for 3 years of watching my son from the shadows, and for the impossible, terrifying hope that maybe, this could actually work. Think the council will just accept this? Think the Alpha King can simply bring back an exiled Omega and crown her Luna? Wait until you see what lengths they'll go to stop him. Wait until you discover which council members wanted her dead, and why. Stay with me. The real battle is just beginning. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. They gave me a bath, hot water, real soap. Servants who tried very hard not to stare at my scars, and my too-thin frame, and my hollow eyes. They dressed me in silk, royal blue, the Luna's colors. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. "You look beautiful," Cassius said from the doorway. I turned. He was in formal robes, crown on his head. Every inch the Alpha King. "I look like a fraud," I said quietly. "Like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." "You look like the Luna you always should have been." He crossed to me, took my hands. "You look like my mate. Cassius, the council, is waiting for us." His eyes were hard. "And they're about to learn what happens when they threaten my family." The throne room was packed. Every council member, every noble, every person of rank and influence in the kingdom, all of them staring as I entered beside the king. Whispers rose like smoke. "That's the exiled Omega. Thought she was dead. How dare she show her face? The scandal." Cassius raised his hand. Silence fell instantly. 3 years ago," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "this council advised me to exile my mate. They said she was a threat to the crown, a danger to my heir. They said an Omega Luna would weaken the bloodline." He looked at each council member in turn. I was a fool to listen. Murmurs erupted. "Your Majesty, Lord Garrett." Cassius's voice cut like a blade. "You were vocal in your opposition to my mating. You argued that Omega blood would contaminate the royal line. You pushed hardest for exile." Lord Garrett stood. Your Majesty, I was acting in the kingdom's best interests. Were you? Cassius descended from the throne. Because I've been reviewing records. Interesting records. About payments made to certain scouts. About reports filed claiming the Omega's death when she was very much alive. Garrett's face went pale. I've also been reviewing the laws regarding exile, Cassius continued. Did you know there's a provision? One that states if an exiled individual survives beyond 1 year, the exile is automatically considered unjust and must be reviewed? He turned to the full council. My mate has survived 3 years. 3 years of winter, starvation, and isolation. 3 years that should have killed her. His eyes found mine. But she's stronger than any of us imagined. He turned back to Garrett. So here's my question, Lord Garrett. Did you deliberately withhold information about her survival? Did you falsify reports to keep me from knowing my mate was alive? Your Majesty, the scouts have confessed. Cassius's voice was ice. They confessed to being paid to report her death regardless of what they found. They confessed to receiving gold from certain council members who wanted the Omega problem permanently resolved. The room erupted. Silence! Cassius's alpha command crashed through the hall. Every wolf went still. Lord Garrett, Lord Thaddeus, Lady Morgana. He named them one by one. You conspired to ensure my mate's death. You threatened my heir. Yes, you manipulated me into exile based on lies and fear. He returned to the throne. Sat. Let the weight of the crown and his authority settle over the room. The penalty for conspiracy against the crown is death, he said quietly. Garrett fell to his knees. Your Majesty, please. We were protecting the kingdom, protecting the bloodline. You were protecting your own power. Cassius's eyes were cold. You knew an Omega Luna would prioritize pack welfare over political games. You knew she'd push for reforms, changes, things that would threaten your influence. He stood. So you removed her. And you would have killed my son too, if given the chance. Aldrich stepped forward from where he'd been standing with his nursemaid. Small, brave, absolutely fearless. That Omega is my mama, he said clearly, his child's voice carrying through the silent hall. And she's strong, and she's kind, and she survived because the moon wanted her to live. He looked at Lord Garrett. You're the one who's weak, he said, because you were afraid of her. The hall was so silent you could hear breathing. Cassius looked at his son with such fierce pride, I thought my heart would burst. Lord Garrett, Lord Thaddeus, Lady Morgana, you are stripped of your titles, your lands, and your positions on this council. You are exiled from this kingdom immediately, and if you ever return, his eyes were winter itself. I will consider it an act of war. Guards moved forward, arrested the 3 council members who'd orchestrated my exile. As for the rest of you, Cassius said, addressing the remaining council, let me be absolutely clear. Acera is my mate, my chosen Luna, the mother of my heir. She will be crowned within the week. He held out his hand to me. And anyone who has a problem with that can leave now. Because I'm done letting fear and politics dictate who deserves protection in this kingdom. I took his hand, climbed the steps to the throne, stood beside him. I present to you, Cassius said, Luna Sarah, your queen. The hall erupted, but this time not with objections, with cheers. Aldrich ran up the steps and threw himself at both of us. We caught him, held him between us. A family, finally, whole. Epilogue. 6 months later, I found Aldrich in the gardens at dawn. He was supposed to be sleeping, but old habits die hard. The cub who'd spent 2 months escaping palaces still woke before sunrise sometimes. Can't sleep? I asked quietly. He looked up from where he was examining a frost-covered flower. I dreamed about the ruins, he said. About when I used to come find you. Bad dream? No, he smiled. Good dream, because you were there, and you didn't have to hide anymore. I pulled him into my arms. He was getting bigger, stronger. The nursemaid said he'd shot up 3 inches since I'd returned. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, "for all those months, for not being here, for—" "Don't be sorry, Mama." He looked at me with eyes too wise for his age. "You survived. You stayed alive so you could come back. That's the bravest thing ever." Footsteps behind us. Cassius appeared, wrapped in a sleeping robe, looking worried. "I woke up and you were both gone." He stopped, saw us, relaxed. "Should have known you'd be together." "Old habits," I said. He sat beside us on the garden bench, pulled us both close. "The council approved the new welfare laws yesterday," he said. "The ones you proposed, protection for Omegas, restrictions on exile, requirements for council transparency. They approved them?" I stared at him. "All of them?" "All of them," he smiled. "Turns out, when you remove the corrupt members and replace them with people who actually care about the pack's well-being, progressive laws become a lot easier to pass." I leaned against him, felt Aldrich curled between us. 3 years ago, I'd been dying in ruins, abandoned and forgotten. Now I was here, crowned, protected, home. "Thank you," I whispered, "for finding me, for fighting for us, yet for being brave when it mattered." "Thank Aldrich," Cassius said. "He's the one who refused to give up, who kept escaping, who knew you were alive when everyone else had given up hope." I looked at our son, at the small, fierce cub who'd defied a kingdom to find his mother. "How did you know?" I asked him. "How did you know I was alive? That I was in those ruins?" Aldrich tilted his head thoughtfully. "I dreamed about you," he said simply. "Every night. You sang me the moon song, and I followed the singing until I found you. The mate bond. Of course. Even as a cub, even across miles of separation, he'd felt the bond between us. Followed it home. You're extraordinary," I told him. "You know that?" "I know," he grinned. "Papa tells me all the time." Cassius laughed. The sound was lighter than I'd ever heard it. "Come on," he said. "Let's go back to bed. We can watch the sunrise from there." "Together?" Aldrich asked hopefully. "Together," I confirmed. "Always together now." We walked back to the royal chambers as dawn broke over the palace. A king, a queen, a prince who'd been brave enough to defy the world. The council had tried to break us. They'd failed, because blood recognizes its own, and no crown, no exile, no conspiracy could sever the bonds that mattered most. Love, family, home, the things worth escaping palaces for, the things worth surviving impossible winters for, the things worth fighting kingdoms for, and we had all 3.